Welcome to Robohunter 2 Spy City. I've always wanted to make a video series where I look at old games from the forgotten eras of the internet, and I thought this game was the perfect candidate. It was created in 2001 and uploaded to the LEGO website. It was created by Templar Games, who is a studio that's still making games today. So this game was an advert game tie-in for the LEGO Mindstorms product. If you guys remember that product, it was essentially a LEGO set where you could build little robots, and you could program them in a block-based scripting language and have them go around and do things. So this game was designed to advertise that product. There was a previous game, Robohunter 1, which, as far as I'm aware, no one has been able to get running anymore, so here we're stuck with the sequel. So this game was made in Shockwave, and if you're familiar with old game preservation, you'll know that Shockwave games are quite difficult to get running nowadays, especially as compared to Flash player games. It was very hard for me to get this game running. I'll put some instructions in the description, which if you follow you may have some success, but I'm not promising anything. These games are not so easy to get running nowadays. There is some good news though, so a lot of the assets in this game are actually Flash movies, and what I was able to do is I was able to take those, upscale them, and if you know Flash, you'll know that it's vector graphics. So when you upscale it, the vector edges stay clean and crisp. There are some raster images, which get blurry when you upscale them, but a lot of interesting animation has been done in vector art, so those look pretty great even today. So I've upscaled those to 720p. One of the reasons why it's so hard to get Shockwave games running nowadays is that Shockwave is not just a single plugin, unlike Flash, which is a single plugin that you download and install and you can play all the Flash games. Shockwave is actually itself a plugin, but it downloads other plugins called extras, and each game specifies what extras that they need in order to run, and these extras are essentially hosted elsewhere on the internet. The issue is that nowadays, like, most of those sites are down, and if you try to run these games, they won't be able to get their extras that they need in order to run. So you're essentially on the scavenger hunt of trying to find these extras scattered throughout the internet in various archival sites. And some games that use obscure extras, well, I couldn't find those extras anymore. So I guess those games will have to stay in their unplayable state until such extras can be found. This game has also got other issues with missing assets, which were unable to be archived, and these missing assets break the game in some very unusual ways. So we'll see that once we get into the gameplay. Once the gameplay starts, it's going to be much lower resolution. I wasn't able to upscale these in the same way that I was with the Flash assets. So these are just upscaled to 2x with nearest neighbor interpolation. So the way the game starts is you've got a case file. And these case files, they describe a crime that's happened. A randomly generated item was stolen from a randomly generated location using a randomly generated tool. So that describes the setup for the scenario that we find ourselves in. Once you hit the command button, you can then go in and play as a little RC car and drive around. And this RC car has got a camera, which you can look around, zoom in, and things like that, and take snapshots. The way this game works is that 5 spies have been randomly generated and placed into this city. One of those spies is the cat, who is the person who committed the crime that was presented to us in the case file. And we're trying to figure out which of those spies is the cat. At a high level, this game boils down to a logic puzzle where you're trying to figure out who does not have an alibi for where they were last night during the time that the crime took place. So you'll notice that there's a timer in the corner. Now, as time progresses, you'll get messages from your command. And what I've noticed is that actually the messages come in from characters that are named after the developers of the game. So these messages, they tell you of a meeting between one of the 5 spies and a contact. and then they give you a location that the spy is going to emerge from, and they give you a time where that's going to happen. So what you have to do is drive over to that location, which is marked on your map, and you also have a little arrow that shows you where it is, and essentially wait. And you wait for that time where the spy emerges, and you try to snap a photo of their face as they emerge. You can also try and follow them and see if you can get a good photo, but I found that you pretty much have to get a photo right off the bat because it's hard to snap a photo while you're tailing them. Once you snap a photo, you can send that photo to command, and they will send you back a dossier after a certain time delay. Unfortunately, this system doesn't actually work properly, and I'm not able to get dossiers for a lot of the spies. It seems to work randomly, and I'm betting that it's due to some missing assets. So you tail the spies to the place where they meet their contact. Sometimes the spy arrives first and the contact arrives later. Sometimes the contact arrives first and the spy arrives later. Sometimes, sort of humorously, the spy and the contact will end up meeting up as they're walking to their contact location. You can sort of humorously see them walk side by side as they get to their contact location. So once the spy and the contact meet up, they'll start a conversation, and you have to get close until you see the recording indicator in the corner of the screen. Once you get to a certain distance, you can actually listen in on their conversation, and you get a transcript of what they're talking about. After you've recorded a conversation, you get that conversation stored in your spy log where you can check it at any time. These conversations also seem to be randomly generated from templates, and they'll talk about the spy either trying to acquire some item, or they'll talk about seeing another spy the previous night. So they'll say something like they saw a man at the hotel the previous night, and this is supposed to give that person an alibi, saying that they were here that night, therefore they couldn't have stolen the item from the case file. So you're supposed to take all of these spy logs and all of your dossiers. So once you get the dossiers, which we'll see later, it gives you like a description of the spy, saying that they're a man or a woman, and they have some distinguishing characteristic like one eye or fake leg. So you take your dossiers and your spy logs, and you do essentially a logic puzzle to figure out who is the cat from the case file in the beginning of the game. So you might have noticed that the voices that the characters are speaking, it sounds a little bit like a real voice, but just reversed. So I took the conversation that you just heard and reversed the audio, and it's interesting. You can hear some words here and there, but it's also, there's a lot that's still unintelligible, and I'm wondering what the source file for these dialogues were. Anyways, you'll see, because I'll play some of the audio here, but it almost sounds like someone recorded a voice from some computer or some computer software or some electronic device, and then use that as a sample for the dialogue.
Show all option. Hide. Snooze. My location.
And the tool, which represents synchronized deadly session goals.
Option enabled. Help see who plays. Each dialogues when hold that N.
Between copy, clear button, and the tool.
So that's essentially the structure of this game. You drive around, you tail spies, you take photos of them, and you listen in on their conversations. Now at any time, you can hit that comlink button over on the left, and you can say, oh, I know who the cat is, and you can select one of the spies to accuse as being the cat. And that's how you either win or lose the game if you select wrong. So this is the first dossier that we've seen so far. As far as I can tell, these are completely entirely randomly generated. The names, the days, the aliases, as well as the notes at the bottom. So this game actually has quite a lot of elements of procedural generation. So this is the part where I admit that I was not able to beat this game. I played for almost half a day, and I kept trying. And unfortunately, the game is glitched, probably due to missing assets, in that sometimes you just don't get the dossiers, and if you try to take more photos of the same spy, it'll say you already have the dossier when you clearly don't. And the issue is that you need to have the dossier of a spy in order to accuse them of being the cat. And at most, I was only able to get 2 of the 5 dossiers. And that means that I can't accuse anyone of being the cat if I don't have their dossier. So at that point, I wasn't able to beat the game. Another issue is that some of the flash files are missing. So the way this game works is that if you win or lose, it redirects you to a different page which shows an animation. Some of those flash files are missing, including the you win animation. So even if I were to beat this game, it would just show a black screen, unfortunately, because that animation has been lost. So you might have noticed that this game has got stealth elements. If you get too close to either a spy or a contact, they'll go into an alerted phase where they'll say some dialogue and they'll be like, "Oh, who's there?" And at that point, you have a certain amount of time to get out of range before they detect you. What I've noticed is that the game is, in general, it's pretty generous about this. So you have quite a lot of time to get out of that spy's visibility range before you get caught. So some personal background, I definitely remember playing this game back in the day. Although I think I remember being afraid of the game, possibly due to a combination of its dark aesthetics, stealth mechanics, as well as the ever-present ticking timer in the corner. I think this story is pretty common amongst a lot of people because there's quite a few equivalent tip of my joystick posts. So r/tip of my joystick is like a forum where if you have this game that you remember vaguely but you don't remember the name, you can go and post like a description of that game and people will help you figure out what that game was. And there's quite a few posts about this game on there. So I guess a lot of people vaguely remember playing this game back in the day, but they don't remember like the name of the game. I think the game that most people probably remember playing on the LEGO website is LEGO Backlot, which was kind of this open world game where you could walk around like a movie studio and do various tasks. That game was actually made by the same developers as this, Templar Studios. So I already played LEGO Backlot on my brother's channel. We also played another LEGO web game called Pepper Skateboarding Challenge, which was made by a different studio called The Planet. And these guys made a ton of games for LEGO as well, including LEGO Belts and LEGO Dreams. I also played LEGO Belts on my brother's channel. That game was pretty difficult to get working, but it was definitely worth it because it's a pretty interesting puzzle game that also has reflex elements. So you have to essentially come up with a strategy and then execute it well. 2 other games that I remember from the LEGO website are Junkbot and World Builder. I don't remember if those were Flash or Shockwave. So I'll provide some details about how I recorded this game. In order to record the Flash movies, what I did was I used regular Internet Explorer, like the old school Internet Explorer, not Edge. But you can still run that on Windows 10 today. I used old school Internet Explorer and I dragged and dropped the SWF files into that, and I scaled up the window so that it was 720p. And I recorded those in OBS. So the interesting thing though is that clearly like the animations were not meant for that aspect ratio, because although it centers the animation in the center of the screen, it still draws some elements outside of where the animation is supposed to be. So like for example, if there's like a shadow or something, or like a character is coming into frame, you can see them spawn on the edge. So I had to crop those animations down so that they were in the original intended aspect ratio, just at a higher resolution. So for the game itself, It's running in a Windows XP VM, and I had to turn it down to use only one processor core. I found that when I ran with 2 virtual cores, the game just didn't work and constantly crashed. So I don't know what's up with that. Just a weird limitation. And getting the actual Shockwave stuff running was kind of frustrating, but I had to use... there's like multiple ways to install Shockwave. I had to use the one that comes with all the extras, which is like a full install, and it was like an MSI format, so I had to install that. Then I had to patch the extras with a zip file that's provided on the Lego Game Pack website. So Lego Game Pack is the site where I got all these old games. They've got them preserved as best as they could, and they've got a patch file with a ton of extras, and I had to manually bring those extras in and put those in the Shockwave directory. And after that, I was able to get the game running. Again, so the VM stuff, it's also recorded in OBS. I think one of the reasons why this game has stuck around so long in my memory is because it's 3D, which back then was still kind of a novelty. There weren't that many 3D web games back then, and I have to imagine that these games were kind of hard to make, since, most people were just using Flash. But, nowadays we have Unity, so anyone can make 3D games. I think another reason why I remember this game is because it seemed so mysterious at the time. It seemed like there were so many different systems and things like that, and you were getting communications from people, and there were people walking around. Now, sort of unraveling the game and seeing the systems like working together, it doesn't seem as mysterious. But back then, I definitely felt that this game had an air of mystery around it. As a game dev myself, when I look at my old games, they remind me of the period of life that I was in when I was making them. So they remind me of where I was living, what I was doing at the time. And I wonder if the same holds true for the devs of these games, because this game is almost 20 years old at this point. So at this point, they were in a completely different stage of their career than they are right now. So I'm wondering if when they look back on these games, they sort of have flashbacks to their lives at that point in time when they were making it. So this run ended the same way most of my runs did, which is by me glitching out and the game screen turning black. Unfortunately, at this point, the only thing that I can do is accuse the one person whose dossier I actually have. This turns out to be incorrect, and I'm redirected to a lose screen which is blank because that asset is missing. However, one of the other lose screens is available, so I'll show that lose screen coming up. I wanted to make sure that I tested out what happens if you get caught by one of the spies. Well, the game is pretty generous about this, but if you sort of sit next to where the spy is, you will eventually get caught, and the game actually has a unique losing animation for when you get caught. And they actually have 2 separate animations, one for if you get caught by a female spy, and one if you get caught by a male spy. So I'll show both of those animations coming up. So that's all the gameplay footage that I have for Robohunter 2. Before I go, I want to leave you with the credits animation. This is a really cool animation which features a ton of really nice vector art as well as an extended version of the main theme.